As the buckets are going past, I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's message and begin sharing with you on our topic that's called As I Follow Christ. That's what we're calling this series, As I Follow Christ. And we're taking this title from 1 Corinthians 11:1, where the Apostle Paul challenges us with what is your standard for living. He says in 1 Corinthians 11:1, he says to the Corinthians, hey, follow me as I follow Christ. Imitate me as I imitate Christ. And so we started talking about this last week. We said, what is your standard? Where do you get your standard from? And where do you get your standard for marriage? Where is it? Is it from ones that you've observed, from your parents, from your friends? Where do you get your standard for business ethics? Where do you get your standard for character? Where do you get your standard for how you spend your money and what you spend your money on? And where do you get your standard for what it means to be a good friend, relationships? And so what we're doing is, instead of using whatever standard was handed to us or whatever standard we came up with in our own mind, we're doing what Paul said. We're going to the standard of Jesus and calibrating ourselves to his word and to his standard. And if we put Jesus at the bullseye, it really calibrates us to living at a very high standard. And this isn't legalism. This isn't, hey, we're going to do this so we feel bad about ourselves. This isn't trying to earn our salvation. It's none of that. It's raising the standard to Jesus. And otherwise, if we don't do that, we end up sort of calibrating to our environment. We end up just kind of becoming one of the people around us, or we leave it to ourselves, which is also not very wise, because we are so flawed in our perspectives and our wisdom. So we're taking the example of Paul here. I want to take a look at the standard that Jesus sets as it relates to relationships. And today, as I talk to you about this, I want you to allow this to permeate your thinking in all of your relationships. Start from the top and work your way down. So if you're here and you're married, this should be part of the way that you proceed with your husband or wife. If you're in a serious dating relationship, or your relationship with your children, regardless of their season of life, this should apply certainly to extended family and business colleagues and neighbors and everybody who you're in relationship with. I want to start with a concept that we get from Jesus, and it's the idea of loving people beyond just your small circle of people. We tend to think of love as, I love my close family, my closest friends, and then everybody else I kind of come in contact with, I kind of tolerate or learn how to people skill or move my way through. Whereas Jesus really sets a standard much higher. He says basically everybody you come in contact with, people that you love, you should love quickly and in a very broad sense. It doesn't mean you're equally close to everybody. But Jesus was able to love quickly, and it didn't take him 6 months to love somebody. And his love wasn't even dependent on their faithfulness or consistency. He was full of love. In fact, he even says to us, he says, hey, one of the ways that the world will know you're different is that you love each other in a broad sense. And so when we look at how Jesus relates to his disciples and how he loves and how he handles relationships, he's really teaching us a lot. A couple things to note. Jesus in his ministry had a lot of touches. So he touched a lot of people. He met a lot of people. When you see things like feeding the 5,000 and the Sermon on the Mount, and everywhere Jesus went, there were crowds. And so he had brief interactions with a lot of people. But he had 12 people he was really close with. He had 12 disciples who he selected. People didn't fill out applications for this. He went out and selected, hey, you, 12. And then he had within that 3 who he was really close to, very tight with. And that's important, because we all do have an emotional capacity when it comes to very close relationships. And if you try to be close with everybody, it's just not possible. Jesus decided to kind of model it for us and to drill down with a handful of people. The other thing to note before we get into this story is to think about the fact that Jesus was fully God and fully man. So as you think about that, it's very important, because we can't deify him to the point we forget about his humanity. Jesus wasn't, a sanctified RoboCop. He wasn't, walking around, as fully God. And he was emotional. He was emotionally invested. He was a person. And so you got to keep that in mind. In fact, when you read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the account of Jesus' life, you'll see this a lot, where Jesus becomes emotionally invested. And he brings a dynamic to deity that maybe hadn't really fully been there before his time. Look what we see in John 15:15. These are Jesus' words. John 15:15, he says, I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. I've called you friends. And so we see what it means to be a friend from Jesus, what that looks like, okay? All right, so turn with me in your Bibles, the book of Matthew chapter 26. We're going to look at a passage of Scripture where Jesus was under tremendous pressure. Anybody under pressure right now? You're just going through a pressure season. I bet Jesus probably right up there with your pressure season because he was about to go to the cross. Okay, he's about to die on the cross. He was about to be stretched beyond his bounds physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And up to this point, Jesus had invested himself in his disciples, and it had been mostly give and very little take. He was give, invest. And now he was coming to a place where he found himself needing something from someone and from some people. Here's what it says, Matthew 26, starting in verse 36. It says, then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John. These are Jesus' best friends. And he became anguished and distressed. Anguished and distressed. Verse 38, he told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Interesting to see Jesus in a feeling needy. It says he's anguished and distressed, and he's saying, look, I'm at the place where I feel like my life is on the line. Desperate. I want you to think about emotions for a minute. Emotions make us uncomfortable for one big reason, because we don't have full control of them. You can't fully control your emotions. And whenever you get emotions, your emotions are coming on, they freak you out because you can't control them. This is why some of you have said this before, or all of us have said this before. You start doing something and you get emotional and you're like, I said I wasn't going to do this. I said I wasn't going to do this. I don't want to do this. And you start to cry. Have you ever cried and you didn't want to cry? Everything in you is like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And you begin to cry. You begin to react emotionally. This is why some of you won't go into certain situations or have certain conversations, because you know once you start down the road of that conversation, it's going to come unraveled, and there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot stop it. Some of you, it's the emotion of anger. You know a certain topic or a certain situation or a certain thing makes you angry, and you're like, and maybe someone tries to get you into that, and you're like, I'm not going there. Because if I go there, I know my emotions are going to kick up, and I will not be able to shut them off. We do not have control of emotions. I'll tell you, I have three things that make me cry every time. Three things every time. Number one, The Notebook. The Notebook gets me every single time. I'll never forget, first time, my wife's like, you want to go see the movie The Notebook? I'm just like, sure, whatever. What's it about? Oh, we'll find out when we get there. All right. And I sit there. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? They die together in a hospital bed. Like, she keeps coming back, and then he loses her and stuff. I'm sitting there like, what? I'm in the thing, I'm trying to choke it down. I'm next to my wife. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, what? I'll never forget. I get to the end of it. The first time we watched it in the theater, we drove home in silence. I didn't say anything. Sitting there, man, I'm in the driveway, and for like 10 minutes, just sitting there like, because I know if I start talking, I'm like, I love you so much. Like, I love you so much. Like every time, if that movie comes on, I don't care if it's TBS, I don't care if it's if it comes on and I turn it on, I just know I'm gonna be balling, dude. By the end of it, I'm done. The second one is It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life gets me every single time. And for some reason, I watch it every Christmas. Every Christmas, man, that movie gets me. You get to the end, are you kidding me? This guy, he wanted to be dead. You know, Mr. Potter gets the best of him, like that complete creep. Mr. Potter, like, takes his money, could have told him where it was, but he didn't. And so he's thinking, man, it's so bad. And then he, gets a picture of what life would have been like without him, but then he gets a second chance, you know what I'm saying? He comes back, and then he thinks he's going to prison. The auditor's there, they're ready to slap the cuffs on him, and then all of his friends show up, man, with all this money. And then Sam stinking Wainwright. Sam Wainwright sends the telegram. He's like, look, man, as much as he's got a blank check, man, from Sam Wainwright. And then Clarence gets his wings, bro, on top of it. Are you serious? He gets his wings as well. I mean, that part every time. His friends show up in the nick of time. He had put his dreams to the side to help everybody. And then they come back. Unbelievable. Every single time. When Auld Lang Syne comes on, it's like waterworks, dude. I don't even fight it anymore. I love that movie. The third is anytime I see a military family and the mom or dad comes out of battle and surprises the family, dude, it doesn't matter where I'm at, I am done. It's over. Okay, I did one time, for whatever reason, I punished myself. I watched a montage. It was like 50 in a row. I had to check myself into rehab. I cried for like 6 months. Every single time those emotions hit me, and there's nothing I can do. I can't shut it off. And now there's that. There are certain things that get under my skin. There are times I become angry. You know what I'm talking about. You have the same stuff. That's the thing about our emotions. Our emotions freak us out. Now, this is the thing about our emotions is that if you get hurt emotionally, you get taken advantage of emotionally, you get wounded emotionally, you go down to the valley emotionally, it does something to you. And you have certain conversations with yourself and you make certain decisions, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, but it's usually something like this. This hurts so bad, I don't ever want to go through it again. And when that sort of control's been taken away from you and you're wounded and you're feeling things you don't want to feel and you have no control over it, somebody made you feel that way because you trusted them and they violated you. They wounded you. You feel such little control that every one of your impulses says, never again. And sometimes it's impulsive and sometimes it's literal. You say with your mouth, never again. And so the instinct there is to put up walls and to go, I'm going to just do me. And I'm never going to let someone hurt me like that again, and I'm going to keep a distance. And so what we attempt to do is a massive mistake. But I get it. To shut our emotions off. To shut our emotions off and to not re-engage. And what we do is we take relationships and we make them very, very shallow. You look at Jesus. Jesus got hurt emotionally more than once. If you read in John 11, it's the story of Jesus and Lazarus, who was his good friend. He loved this guy Lazarus, and Lazarus had two sisters, Mary and Martha. They were all very close. And Lazarus dies. And when Lazarus was sick before he died, they sent word to Jesus, said, come heal him. And Jesus didn't get there in time. So here's what happens. Jesus shows up. Lazarus is dead. He shows up. And Lazarus' sister, in verse 21, comes up and says, where were you? If you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Thank you. Puts that on Jesus. Then a few verses later, I believe it's verse 32, Martha comes up and says, where were you? If you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. Two people throwing that on him. Then all the people start to murmur around and go, well, he could open blind eyes, but he couldn't save his friend. The Bible says that by the time Jesus got to the tomb, he was angry. And this is where we get the famous verse, John 11:35, Jesus wept. He cried. He was emotional. He had engaged. He cared enough to cry. He cared enough to be stirred that deeply. He cared enough to be angry. He didn't put up emotional walls. And we see it with his own disciples. He gets denied, he gets disrespected, he gets left hanging, and yet Jesus chose to engage emotionally. I know that's for somebody today. Maybe you're here and you've been wounded emotionally, and there's been either you have overtly or internally said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to create distance in the relationships. I'm going to keep people at an arm's length. I'm not going to let anybody get in that close and hurt me. And Jesus went through it too. Look what it says here. He's so vulnerable. He says, I'm crushed to grief to the point of death. Stay here with me and keep watch. Verse 40. It says, then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? You ever had somebody, you just gave, didn't ask for anything, gave. Finally came to a point where you had need and you said, hey, can you help me? And then they don't do it. They leave you hanging. And you kind of been, you say you've been keeping score. You're like, I'm up like 100-0 in this relationship, and I just asked you one time and you didn't come through. Jesus has been here with these disciples, man. They've been doing life. Jesus has been investing in them. He's been pouring himself into them. And he gets to this one place where he's in anguish. He's about to go to the cross. And he shoots them straight this one time, says, will you help me? Will you? And they fall asleep on him. And I love this. Jesus is like, can't you keep watch with me for 1 hour? All I asked you for is 1 hour. I didn't ask you to take the cross. I didn't ask you to take my burden. I didn't ask you to give me any money. I just asked you to sit with me for 1 hour. Jesus gets a little salty here. And we see from the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and the deity, Jesus, needed somebody not to solve his problem, not to fix it all, not to take his cross, to sit with him. Now, we think about our relationships, the people around us, and we identify people who are hurting around us. We see that. Sometimes it can be overwhelming as the friend because sometimes we misunderstand what we really need to do. When you have friends that are hurting, when you have a wife that is hurting or a husband that's hurting, or sometimes they just need you to sit there. Just to be like, will you be awake and hear and engage emotionally? Will you cry with me? Will you pray with me? Will you just be here? I don't need you to be Dr. Phil. I don't need you to fix me. I don't need you to give me your life savings. I just need you to be present. We see from Jesus. He needed somebody to sit in the garden awake with him. Awake. So he comes back and these guys are asleep. Jesus kind of jumps their case. He's like, what's up? You couldn't do it one time? Now look what he says here in verse 42. It says, then Jesus left them a second time and prayed. So he comes back. So I'm going to give you a second chance. Now this is one of the things that we learn from Jesus. I'm sure he was frustrated. You can tell he's frustrated. I just asked this one thing. It's doable. It's not a big deal. It's small. Jesus has all the logic is on his side here. I didn't ask you for much. I just asked you for one little thing and you didn't do it. He had all the reason in the world to get offended and to shut down and to go, forget you guys. Forget you guys. Why would you do me like this? Jesus could have gone into victim mode. Jesus could have harped on them and made them feel bad. He could have beat them over the head with everything that he had done up to this point for them. What does he do? Right away, gives them a second chance. Tell you what, guys, it's all good. Hey, wakes them up. I'm going to give you a second chance. And he goes to do that. Now, this is one of the things that we learn from Jesus. He says it and then he does it here, which is being quick to forgive. Forgiveness makes you emotionally resilient. And if you're gonna have real quality relationships through the duration of your life, you're going to have to develop emotional resilience. And you develop emotional resilience through forgiveness. That's the only way you can do it. You gotta change the way you look at forgiveness. If you think forgiveness is about them, you're wrong. You're wrong. It's not about them. Forgiveness, if you don't forgive, you stay trapped and you don't bounce back. One of the reasons we reject forgiveness is because I feel like I'm letting them walk on me or I'm letting them off scot-free. And so if I hold a grudge, I feel like in some way I'm punishing them. And depending on the nature of the relationship, maybe, let's just say a marriage, you're in a marriage and you're ticked off and they violated you and they did something wrong and you hold a grudge and so they can feel your energy and they feel your dissatisfaction. And so it's a degree of punishment. Okay, fine, you punish them a little bit. Whatever way you punish them with your unforgiveness, it's a fraction of what it does to you. It's a fraction. I'm talking like a tiny little thing. To you, it's eating you up. It's destroying you. It's fracturing you further. It's making you feel like more of a victim. It's taking you further down. It's slowing your comeback. To them, it's a little inconvenience. You, detrimental. Jesus knew this. I can sit here and beat these guys over the head with their mistake, or I can forgive quickly. I can forgive, I can set them free, and certainly I can set myself free. Jesus knew that what he was about to do was so significant, he didn't have time to be holding grudges with his three best friends. He said, it's all right, guys. I'll give you a second chance. I wish it was done there, but verse 42 gives him the second time. He prayed, my Father, take this cup away unless I drink it. If this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done. When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. Verse 44, so he went to pray a third time, saying the same thing again. Now, here's what's interesting. If you keep reading in this passage, Jesus, one time they fall asleep on him. 2 times they fall asleep on him. Comes back a third time. And you know what Jesus says the third time? You sissies. No, he doesn't say that. He doesn't say that. Here's what he says. He says, you know what, guys? Go ahead and sleep. Go ahead and sleep. Now, Jesus doesn't let these guys take advantage of him. He changes his attitude in terms of how he relates to them and his expectations. First time he expected them to stay awake. They didn't. They fell asleep. All right, we'll give you a second chance. Second time he expects them to stay awake. They fall asleep. Third time he realizes they can't deliver what I need. And instead of harping on them for not being able to give him what he needed when he needed it, he says, he just came to the realization for whatever reason. These guys are either too tired. The Bible says they couldn't keep their eyes open for whatever reason. Maybe they're weak. I don't know. He's like, I don't care. Go ahead and sleep. And continues to move forward. The interesting thing is this is one of the last interactions with Jesus and Peter, Peter being one of his very best friends before Jesus goes to the cross. And then guess what Peter does after that? Peter denies Jesus. Says, I don't know him. He's not my friend. So you go from falling asleep on him in the garden to denying him in his moment of greatest weakness. And the thing that's so beautiful about this whole thing is that Jesus takes his teaching about forgiveness that he has with Peter many chapters before when Peter says, hey, Jesus, if I need to forgive someone, how often should I do it? Maybe like 7 times. Should I forgive him 7 times, then I'm good? Jesus is like, no, 70 times 7. You got to forgive way more than that. Way more than that. Jesus taught him that, but then he models it because he forgives him for falling asleep on him when he needed him 3 times, forgives him for denying him 3 times. And when you read in the book of, I believe it's either Luke or Mark, I can't remember which one, but when Jesus is resurrected and he tells the 3 ladies that observed him post-resurrection, he says, hey, go tell the disciples, and then he names one guy by name. Go tell the disciples and Peter. Make sure Peter's there. Because Peter, his last 6 interactions with Peter were falling asleep 3 times, denying him 3 times. And Jesus says, make sure Peter doesn't think I'm still mad at him. Make sure Peter knows how quick I am to forgive. Tell all the disciples, and especially Peter. You see, Jesus is modeling something for us that will make or break you in relationships. If you don't get this, what you'll do is you'll become more and more of a victim, because it's just bound to happen. People in their humanity, even good folks, make bad decisions. Sometimes in weakness, they fall asleep when they want to stay awake. Other times they deny something, they deny Christ because they're afraid. For one reason or another, their humanity comes to the surface, so just be ready for it. What you've got to do for you, and so that you can have relationships like Jesus did, is be emotionally resilient through forgiveness. You got to get really good at forgiveness. Like, you got to get really good at it. Like do it a lot and quickly. And the faster and the more often you forgive, the more free you become relationally. Otherwise, here's what will happen. You will become so wounded that you will become a zombie who has put up walls so thick and so high because you can't take any more pain and any more hurt. And the initial blow gets so much worse because of holding on to that unforgiveness. And Jesus shows us here. With the deck stacked in his favor, he had every reason to hold it over these guys. And he let go of it. Forgive you. Now, we learn from Jesus here something very important. That we do need help. Nobody likes to be needy. I don't know about you, I don't like to ask for help. I prefer to do it myself. I don't want to be seen as needy. I don't want to be seen as needing help. But I love that Jesus models this, because we all come to places like Jesus where he is in Gethsemane, that you got to admit you need some help. And if Jesus needed 2-3 guys to just sit with him while he prayed, you and I do too. You and I do too. Look what it says in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. It says, 2 people are better than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer. 3 are even better. For a triple braided cord is not easily broken. I found a picture a little while back that I think embodies this whole concept. It was a picture of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't know if you know, they won the NBA championship last year or whatever. I don't know if anybody saw that or not, but that did happen. And I love this picture, because when I see this, this is what I think. This is what I think that the church should look like in the real world. Like after service is done and the fog clears and the lights are gone and you go into like Monday and Tuesday. I think this is what the church looks like, that all of us, like at some point, like you're here. You're Thompson, you're 13, you're down. You're down. Jesus was down in Gethsemane. I need somebody to sit with me. I need somebody to just be with me. I just need you to be awake. I need somebody around me. I need some help. We got to be willing to admit sometimes we're here. And then sometimes we're here. Ecclesiastes says, man, if you fall alone, you're in real trouble. If you're shivering alone, you're in real trouble. If you're in a fight alone, you're in some real trouble. He says, man, one person could help you up, but it'd be better to have a whole crew. That's what the church is. That's what the church is, the body of Christ coming around and sometimes admitting, I'm down. I'm down. And guess what, friend? That's not weakness. The King of Kings and Lord of Lords was down, and he needed somebody to sit with him. It's okay. And if we as a church only do Sunday at 9:30, 11, and 12:30 and come hear a message and go on, then we're not really fulfilling what Jesus intended in healthy relationships. It means that we got to be there for each other. We got to be willing to sit awake with somebody in the garden. It means that we got to forgive quickly and be resilient. Otherwise, I'll be completely me-focused, self-absorbed, and selfish because my walls are so high and thick and they're all by myself. To allow God to use us. This means that most of us in this room, if not all of us, are somewhere in this picture. I'm going to ask you to identify yourself. Where are you at? Are you down? Maybe you're down because you don't like to be a burden to anybody and you feel like you got to have it all together and you got to appear like you're this impenetrable force and you've got that you don't want to admit it. Maybe today is about just admitting, I need somebody to sit with me. I don't need him to fix me. I don't need him to carry my cross. I just need someone to sit with me and somebody to be with me. Maybe you're up here and you're like, I'm not down. I'm actually doing pretty well. And yet, maybe God would use you to reach out and give a hand to somebody to pull them up, to be with them, to come around and come alongside. We'll take a moment, and I want us to pray and let God speak to our hearts. But I want to ask you 3 questions based off this Ecclesiastes 5 text. First one is, where are you falling in need of hand? Right, so Ecclesiastes says if you fall alone, you're in real trouble. Where are you falling? You feel yourself falling. And today it's about admitting it. I'm falling, I need a hand. The second is, where are you cold and need warm? And what I mean by this, remember it says in Ecclesiastes, hey, another person can at least lay next to you and give you some body heat to help you in the process. They're not fixing everything, but just offering their presence, offering proximity, offering attention and focus and the listening ear. Where's an area you say, look, I don't need them to fix me. I just need a person with me, somebody to walk with me through this. And then the last is, where are you being attacked and you need help? Maybe for you in a very real way. You're in a fight that you're like, I need some help. I need somebody to have my back. There's some areas that I need resource, or I do need advice. I do need somebody to come with me and to bring their sword to the fight because I don't know what I'm doing. This is the body of Christ. This is what we do, but it starts with being honest. So would you close your eyes with me, and would you